Got it. Okay, we're being recorded. All right, so blank forms. By the way, if you guys ever have any issues with your contracts or stuff like that, and by issues, I mean you have a question, and before you send it off to one of your buyers or sellers, you can always reach out to one of us. We do have access to your files, so we can actually go into your forms and see what you've done and what you need to get done. So don't be, be proactive. Ask us before anything comes about. And we do have access. I can go in here through my broker dashboard up here if you notice. All right. So let's go to Florida forms. And if you notice, there's a whole bunch of regional forms here. So your boards do offer forms. The MLS offer forms. I have beaches in here. Fannie Mae has forms in here. But we use the Florida forms. All right. That's not to say you can't use any of the others. I am going to actually, let's search for it. And let's type in listing. So I got to scroll back down to Florida. And exclusive right of sale listing agreement. Now, the first thing I want to begin with is it is against company policy to represent yourself as a single agent or as a single agency brokerage. Okay, we are never, ever, ever working in the capacity of a single agent or agency as long as you work for HomeSmart. Okay, so please keep that in mind. So this first or this second one here, I never want to see this listing agreement. Now, most of you might say, well, why? Well, okay, I'm just going to give you a couple of quick pointers. Number one, it's too much liability. All right, there are certain things, and the liability becomes the difference between single agency and transaction brokerage. The main difference is disclosure. You, as a single agency, you have loyalty to your seller, and that loyalty actually makes you ethically not disclose certain things that the seller doesn't want you to disclose. So, and that now becomes a liability. In Florida, we want to disclose. So you will always start any and every transaction as a transaction broker, okay? Which means we will never use, if you guys see my cursor here, we will never use the single agent exclusive right of sale listing agreement. We will never use the consent to transition to a transaction broker, because that actually, what that means, and if you read it, is first of all, you're starting the transaction as a single agent, and then you're asking the parties of the transaction for consent to transition into a transaction broker. So this one's never used either. And there's a lot of confusion in this one. When I tell you guys, if you look at the form number, and I put notes into your Real Smart agent accounts. Hold on one second. There's somebody in the waiting room. Let's let her, Christine.
Got it.
Cool. All right. So never, ever, ever are we a single agency in the or dealing as in the capacity of as a single agency as a HomeSmart agent. Okay, it's actually against company policy. All right. So the one we're never going to use this one. We're never going to use the single agency. We're never going to use the no brokerage. Okay. We are always going to use the exclusive right of sale listing agreement. Okay. This is the one that we require as your broker.
How do we know which one that is?
Well, easy right here. It says transaction broker. And then the easiest way to figure it out also is on the form, on the bottom of each page, it will give you this description right here. ERS-18TB, transaction broker. So when you guys see my notes in your Real Smart agent for your documents, when you're uploading your documents for your files and stuff like that, if you notice, hey, please obtain an exclusive right of sale listing agreement, ERS-18TB, now you know what I'm looking for. There is one other listing agreement that I will accept, and it is the first one, but I don't like to see this because it really doesn't protect you at all. And this one is the exclusive brokerage listing agreement. which basically says that you are the listing agent, but if the seller himself, and it says it right here in the first paragraph, if the seller himself brings a buyer to the table, you will not be able to collect a commission, or he doesn't have to pay you a commission. So this really doesn't protect you as much as the transaction broker one. But I have seen agents and they've asked me, well, Freddie, it's the only way I can get the listing. So I will allow this. Okay, I will allow it. And if you notice down here, it's the EBLA-10.
So this is more like an exclusive brokerage listing agreement, not exclusive right to sell.
Correct.
Okay, and maybe
So-
somebody would use this for like a for sale by owner or something like that if they're trying to sell the property on their own as well.
Correct. So if they, but I mean, like I said, this is very hard because for sale by owner, sometimes, hey, you bring a buyer by and then all of a sudden the buyer goes on his own and they cut a deal behind your back and you really have nothing to protect you. Okay, unless you do an exclusive, and then that complicates things. You do an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, you can do that as well. But that really doesn't protect you from the seller. So I hate to see this one, but I will allow it. Okay. If it's the only way that you're going to be able to, or the last alternative, not the only way, but the last alternative for you to pick up a listing. But just remember, you know, you're running the risk of doing all the work and then not getting paid. All right. So I'm going to jump out of this. I'm not even going to talk about this listing agreement too much. I just wanted to show you guys. Now let's get into the actual listing agreement that I prefer. Sorry. Or that we require, I should say, not prefer. The exclusive right transaction broker here. This is the one we need, the ERS-18TB, okay? So let's open it up and let's go through it real quick. It's not too bad, it's 4 pages long. Basically, seller, line 2, right? And if it's a husband and wife, please have them both sign, okay? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, anything you buy while you're in married, unless you have a prenup or something in effect, is 50-50, right, Doug, in Florida?
Not exactly 50-50 in Florida, but you have homestead rights in Florida.
Okay,
So in order to make the contract binding on the non-signing spouse, you really need them to sign. It also has to do with who's in title. So if just the husband's in title, you still really should have the spouse sign to get around the homestead.
okay. And then typically, do you guys make both parties sign, even if they're not on title, Doug? Is that, you know, like the closing disclosures and all that?
For the deed, yeah, to waive homestead, we'll have them both sign.
Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, and where you can see that is going to the county tax records. Property appraiser's office. You can go there and check it out, see who's on title. And then title will let you know as well. Scott will pick up the phone and call you, hey, we need the wife to sign as well, or the husband to sign, or the other party. So broker is always HomeSmart. Not me, it's not Larry, it's not Jeremy, it's not your name. It is HomeSmart, okay? Because commissions are always paid to your broker, and then your broker pays you, okay?
Well, I want to make sure that people know that I'm the listing agent.
All right, so then you can put down /home, you can put down HomeSmart, or you can put in care of Jeremy Porter. How's that?
I just like
I'll
the
accept that.
recognition. Thanks, Freddie.
So you can always just type in HomeSmart, and I'm just abbreviating, in care of Jeremy, if it makes you feel better. But I can tell you right now, we will never keep your money. We will always pay you.
But
All
isn't
right,
my
it's
name on
just-
the last page anyway?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. All right. Good to know.
Okay, and you're actually going to sign this as an authorized licensee on page 4. Okay, you don't need my signature on page 4. Starting date would be here. Ending date. Now I get this question a lot. So Freddie, I got a listing. How long do you think I should make the seller sign the listing agreement? You know, back in the day when it wasn't such a crazy market and properties were sitting on the market for 45, 60 days, I would make them sign no minimum than 6 months to a year. In today's market, you might want to do 3 months if they're really pressing you, but I would try to get always at least a 6-month listing agreement. Okay, no matter what kind of market I'm in. Now, obviously the seller, well, if you don't sell it in 6 months, then you're not doing something right? That might come about or something like that in today's market. But that's not always the case. Okay, so I would always try to get at least a 6 months on termination date. All right.
Let me just jump in, Freddie, real quick, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Okay, so obviously there's the ideal and then there's how it's done, everybody, right? So, I mean, for the most part in this market, I get between 90 and 120 days signed. You know, and I worry about the relationship, right? If I'm communicating well, if I'm doing my job, if I'm following up and everything like that, and I need an extension, typically I'm getting one if I need one, right? But I don't press it up front because I know they don't know the level of service I'm going to provide, how much communication I'm going to give them and everything like that. So, you know, it's the value that you provide afterwards, right? The photos, the video, the verification after you send over, get the listing agreement signed and you start to list it, and then you send over the MLS sheet and say, hey, can you check it over to see if there's any errors? What do you think of the photos? What do you think of the video? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? You're doing open houses, you're doing everything. And, you know, it's easy to get that extension. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, I would, and that's a great point, Jeremy. I would include the sellers on everything, unless they tell you, you know what, Freddie, I don't want to hear about it. Just take it, do it on your own and get it sold. But I would include them and ask for opinions. Hey, what do you think of the pictures? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? What do you think about doing an open house for the next 3 weekends in a row? And things like that. Get them involved. Let them make the decisions. Let them help with the marketing as well. Hey, you share this on your Facebook, unless they say, hey, Freddie, I want to be discreet. I don't want anybody to know, or my family and stuff, which is typically rare, but you do get those requests as well. So yeah, great point, Jeremy. Get them involved during the whole process. Okay. Because the last thing you want to hear is, well, they put it on the MLS and I haven't heard from my listing agent in 2 weeks. Not good. I would be giving them a report every week, some feedback on showings. If you're not getting showings, I would want to sit down and have a conversation with the sellers on why. And typically, if you're not getting showings, it's because it's overpriced. Right? So things to consider. All right, so moving on. Street address, obviously, legal description, get all this stuff in there. Personal property, including appliances. You might want to include what's included, what's not included. Just keep an eye on personal property that's being conveyed. If the buyer is doing financing, they're not going to finance any personal property. And most lenders will not finance personal property. Okay, so just keep an eye on what's conveying. And you might have to keep it off the contract and have them do a side deal on their own, buyer and seller. Have them sign a contract for whatever it is they're buying as personal property. I would not get involved in the sale of personal property. Okay, stay away.
Freddie, can I jump in real quick here?
Absolutely.
Okay, everyone, please.
And anybody else can jump in. So you guys, if you have questions, if you have a comment, if you had an experience, just chime in.
Please remember that the fridge is standard in the, purchase agreement. Okay.
Right. So fridge, dishwasher, all those stuff, all that stuff is labeled on your contracts. All right. What is not is washer and dryer on the as is and on the far bar. Okay. So just keep an eye on that. If the washer and dryer is conveying, that you would have to list on the contract, and the lender's fine with that. It's appliances.
Okay, so if you take
Okay,
a listing,
when you start conveying
never mind, just kidding.
lawnmowers and furniture and stuff like that, the lender will shoot it down and say, take it off the contract.
So if you get a listing where the fridge is not included, Freddie, am I okay? Can I go? Can I go? Can I? If you get a listing where the fridge is not included, then please make sure that you're putting that on the what's not included, right? Because it's one of the standard included things, and you don't want to be buying somebody a fridge, Okay, so just make sure that you're removing that, especially all you, newer to HomeSmart or newer to Florida agents down here. The fridge is a standard thing. So if it's not conveying with the sale, it's not, you're not putting it in the listing agreement, right? It doesn't matter what you have online. The MLS sheet is not a contract. It's not an agreement between the buyer and the seller.
Where do you put that in here?
On the listing agreement,
Right, because this
Right
is
here.
including appliances.
personal property, including appliances, correct.
But
So you can include it in there just to be,
including meaning not going with the property, or going-
including refrigerator, dishwasher, washer, dryer, electric range.
He's saying, where do you?
Sabina, so you
Right,
list all
where do you
the,
exclude it?
Oh, where would you exclude
I'm
it?
talking about the purchase agreement.
If
But
you,
she's saying that she wants to exclude it on the listing agreement. So your choices are to either list everything that is included, every little thing, or do a C attachment for an exclusion list.
Correct. Who's that, Christine? Thanks, Christine.
is there a separate addendum for exclusions, or do you just do it on your own?
What's excluded
There's
is everything.
really
not-
no. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
what's excluded is everything that's not on this inclusion list.
Oh, okay,
Okay, I'm talking about the purchase agreement, right? I'm jumping forward to, you're the listing agent, you put down on the MLS sheet that the fridge is not included, right? It's not part of the sale, that sort of thing, right? It's not listed of the items that convey with the personal property that conveys with it, right? And then a buyer's agent writes up an agreement, doesn't put anything in that line of what personal property is included, like the fridge, and you don't line it out, you don't put, nope, the fridge is not included, anything like that, then you're buying somebody a fridge at closing. So don't do that.
Sometimes, well, anytime there's a second fridge, a garage fridge or anything, I will write that. If there's more than one refrigerator, I will include that on the listing and in the contract.
Yeah, sometimes there's two refrigerators. Some people have one in the garage, so you might want to include that if it's conveying.
Larry Waters.
And here's the contract. Can you guys see the contract up here? This is the as is. It all is included right here in this paragraph, personal property. And then other personal property, which is right here on this line, is where you would write on line 21, washer, dryer, and anything else that you want to include in there. Just be careful. You don't see my screen now?
no,
No.
we see the listing agreement.
Oh, okay, hold on. How do I do this? All right, let's try it again. Here it is. Okay, let's try this one. Share. Okay, so if you guys see the as-is contract, you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so if you notice, everything is listed right here. And this is the new one, the as-is -6. This is the one that just came out on November 1st. Everything's right here in paragraph between lines 15 and 20. Personal property, unless excluded in paragraph 1E. So anything that's excluded will be down here listed on the purchase contract. Okay, on line 24, which is 1E. And it tells you here, existing property as the date of the initial offer are included in the purchase, range, oven, refrigerators. You notice it says plural, dishwashers, disposal, ceiling fans, light fixtures, drapery rods, draperies, blinds, window treatment, smoke detectors, garage door openers, thermostats, doorbells, television wall mounts. That's actually new. A couple of these are new. They've changed on the new revision. They've added some stuff like the television wall mounts. Mounting hardware is new. Storm shutter protection items and hardware. We actually talked about this when we went through the contract. Doug was pointed out all these things. All right, any questions on this? Let's go back to listing agreement.
What are you doing?
Okay, so listing agreement, price. Or first of all, before we keep going, occupancy, is the property occupied by a tenant? And if so, what are the terms of the lease and when does it expire? If the property is an investment property, I would be asking the seller for and it's on a lease. I would be asking for a copy of the lease. And why is that? Because on the sale, that lease actually transfers over to the new buyer. Even if they don't want it, they have to oblige by that lease. Is that correct, Doug?
Yeah, and you also want to make sure there isn't some type of option in the lease
Correct.
for the tenant.
Correct. So make sure you get a copy of the lease if the property is occupied by a tenant. Okay, buyer's going to want to know this information. We're going to need to disclose as well. And there's an actual paragraph in the contract where it says that this contract is, the property is occupied.
Doug, this is Michelle Massengill. When it's an investment property or short-term rental, would we just write in here, short-term rental contract attached?
I would.
And can I ask?
And that verbiage of short-term rental was actually included into the purchase contract.
Yes, I'm aware of that. My question is, many of these short-term contracts do not have an end date. So what I've been asking is that they go back and add that they can get out of it within 30 days so that it's part of the contract. Is that the proper thing to do?
Doug?
Well, I think, anytime you're disclosing that situation and you're trying to limit the risk to a buyer, then that is the thing to do.
And then my next question is, as the listing agent, am I the one that needs to get the short-term or the seasonal rental addendum signed and posted in my documents for the buyer, or would the buyer's agent be responsible for that?
Well, you're both responsible because you're both working in the capacity of a transaction broker. So as the listing agent, I would try to get as much information and have it available to any buyer or buyer's agent.
Okay, thank you.
Great questions, Michelle. Anybody else? All right. Financing terms.
Freddie, hold
Yes.
on. You just said, just back up for a second. The way you just said that, you said you both are acting as transaction brokers.
Right. Disclose, disclose, disclose. You are never a single agent as long as you're with HomeSmart.
I know that, but how do we know that the other person is? We don't. I mean, unless they have to disclose. So it may not be that they're a transaction broker, correct?
Okay, so if they disclose that they're acting as a single agency, then that's fine.
Yes.
That's fine. I don't care what the other agency does, to be honest with you. But they do have to disclose, and that's another liability. As a single agent, you have to disclose to everybody in the transaction that you're acting in the capacity of a single agency. And there's actually a form for that too.
So are we supposed to be, we're supposed to be asking for that when a buyer makes an offer?
They're supposed to provide it to you.
But that paperwork isn't required for us to send. to
No,
the-
I'm not. I mean, if they disclose that they are acting in the capacity of a single agency, then yes, then I'm going to require it. Actually, the only way to disclose it is in writing, right?
The assumption is their transaction.
Correct.
Yeah, well. let's
And I
not
could
assume.
tell you about 90% of the brokerages in Florida act in the capacity of a transaction brokerage.
Yeah. I
There's very
don't-
few brokerages that want to take on the liability and pay the extra premiums on their E&O to be handled as a single agency. So,
I know of a couple around here, and that's why I'm asking, because I just actually, one of the ones that I lost, she was a single agent, and I found that out after I lost it. That one that I'm still upset about.
yeah, she should have disclosed
yeah.
right from the very beginning.
That's what I said to her too. But
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
All right, so price and terms, put your price in there. Financing terms, cash, conventional, whatever it is that the property actually you can convey with. If you can obviously cash, conventional, you'd have to look up VA and FHA standards and stuff and see if the property actually, it might be over the FHA threshold or the VA threshold. So if you're at a $700,000 purchase price, it's not going to qualify for FHA or VA, right? So just keep an eye on that. Seller financing. Will the seller be willing to hold a mortgage? 9 times out of 10, no, they want their money, but you never know. Okay, this is another option for buyers if the seller is willing to take a second mortgage, especially in today's date when they're waiving appraisal. You might get that. All right, so keep that in mind and put that out and ask the seller, are you willing to take back a mortgage if we get into a certain situation? Assumption of existing mortgage. The buyer may assume existing mortgages. You have to, in order for you to actually know this, the seller would have to provide you a copy of their mortgage agreement. I can tell you VA and FHA are assumable mortgages, I believe. If there's any mortgage people on here, correct me if I'm wrong.
It's the old mortgages were assumable. The modern ones in the last 10 years are not.
Okay, keep going here. Seller expenses. What do you guys usually put here? I'm gonna put this out to here. Let's see what you guys say. Do you leave it blank? And Doug, can you explain what this actually means? We'll pay a mortgage discount or other closing costs not to exceed?
Well, this is just saying that the seller will contribute toward the buyer's mortgage new financing expenses. So, a discount fee is basically to get the interest rate lower. So
this is concerning discount points, right?
yes, or other costs as well. It says other closing costs. So I wouldn't leave it blank ever. So if they're not going to pay anything, then I would just put either an NA or a 0 there.
Yeah, but how do you know, since that's negotiated with when you're doing the transaction?
Because just because you put 0 here doesn't mean you can that they can't change their mind and do something in a specific transaction.
Gotcha.
This is just, if someone presents an offer that meets all of the criteria listed here, they have to accept it, because that's how you earn your commission. Your commission is earned if an offer is presented that checks all these boxes.
Any questions on that? So again, I'm glad Doug reiterated that. Don't leave blanks on any of these forms. Fill them in. That's what they're there for. Okay, the rest of the verbiage is already in there for you. You just have to fill in the blanks. And we're one of the few states that has contracts like this. Should see California, they're like 40 pages long. So, and then with the addendums, it turns into 80 pages. It's crazy. But anyway, multiple listing service. Before we go into that, broker obligations. Broker agrees to make diligent and continued efforts to sell the property in accordance with this agreement until a sales contract is pending on the property. Okay, so basically you are marketing this property until you're under contract. And then there's actually a clause in here that will allow you to market it afterwards if you want to take backup offers and things like that, or the seller would like to take backup offers. Remember, it's their decision, not yours. Anything on these contracts is their decision. You're just putting the options out there. Okay. Multiple listing service. Placing the property in a multiple listing service is beneficial to the seller because the property will be exposed to a large number of potential buyers. As an MLS participant, the broker is obligated to enter the property into the MLS within 1 business day of marketing the property to the public. So what does this actually mean? If you throw it on your Facebook, guess what? The next day, that property better be on the MLS. Okay, because if they catch you, there is a clear cooperation fine that they will give you. They might, I don't know how, I mean, we've never been to one of those proceedings, but they might give you a warning the first time. And I know some MLSs actually have a certain amount of days as well. For example, Stellar, if you're going to go past 5 days not marketing the property once or not putting it on the MLS, once you start marketing, they want an exemption, an MLS exemption form filled out.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So here in Florida, something I don't know how it happened. confounded me. So I saw it on Facebook. It was an open house for the weekend, and it was a holiday weekend where Monday would be a holiday. So they had an open house starting Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it wasn't going to go active until what, I guess Tuesday. But they said Monday is a holiday, so they were able to get all this time in before actually putting it in the MLS. Is that right?
Is that right to do, you're saying?
Well, it was wrong to do. Was it legal?
Well, if it's wrong, do you think it's legal? I mean, you know, do you want to pursue it, filing an ethics report?
No, none of that. I just thought that was a lot of audacity on their part.
I mean, typically the right way to do this is you get your listing agreement. I would, you know, start the listing agreement the day you do, but have them, let's say it's going to usually take some time to get your marketing done, right? Your professional photo shots. Maybe you want to do an inspection before so that the seller is aware of anything that needs to be done. Whatever your marketing is, yeah, it usually takes a week or 2 weeks to get all that together.
How could they advertise open house on public media and it not be active, and you know, until the next business day?
That's a well, it says within 1 business day of marketing the property. Okay, so it actually says it right here, 1 business day.
So they were illegal.
Well, not really, because Saturday's not a business day, Sunday's not a business day, and holiday was Monday, so that's not a business day either, right? So they push the edge on it, and Tuesday is actually legal because it's the next business day.
And you probably have a separate agreement with the MLS, right? When you sign up for that, and
Yeah.
that likely controls those requirements.
Yeah, and I know Stellar is 5 days.
Thank you.
All right, so keep that in mind. For you post a sign up in front of the house, you got to have it on the MLS. You post a picture on Facebook, you got to have it on the MLS. Typically, the way I like to do it is I try to make the listing go live on a Friday, and then I'm doing an open house that following Saturday and Sunday. So that whole weekend, I'm doing an open house, obviously trying to get the buyer, trying to sell the property, and possibly pick up some other listings or buyers in the neighborhood that are actually visiting your open house. So I would use it as leverage, as the same as using it as marketing for yourself. So put the property on the MLS on a Friday, do an open house on Saturday, do an open house on Sunday, and hopefully you'll have about 10, 15 offers on a Monday morning. In today's market, very doable.
What I believe she was asking, because they were doing the open house over the weekend, but they didn't put it in the MLS.
Right.
But
So
so if you
it allows you 1
listing-
business day.
So if you take the listing on Friday, if there's a holiday on Monday, you can technically wait till Tuesday to put it in the MLS.
Correct.
Okay.
Any questions on that? And it continues to say the listing will be published accordingly in the MLS unless the seller directs the broker otherwise in writing. Seller authorizes broker to report to the MLS its listing information and price, terms, and financing information on the resulting sale for use by authorized board, association members, and MLS participants and subscribers unless the seller directs the broker otherwise in writing. And here's where we get into all of that. Broker authority, seller authorizes broker to market the property to the public unless limited in paragraph 6B. And 6B is down here, not publicly market to the public, seller opt out, which means the seller does not authorize you to put this on the MLS or the internet. But why would you want to do that? Why would you want to take a listing that they're telling you not to put it on the MLS? I mean, I'm not saying not to take the listing. I'm just saying it's going to make your job a lot harder.
I already have the buyer.
Okay.
Well, and I've had people that want the neighborhood to be able to look at it before it goes public.
Just remember, follow the guidelines. If your MLS requires 5 days, make sure you get it on the MLS in 5 days. So do your marketing, get it done, and then put it on there. Okay. And notice here, public marketing includes, but is not limited to flyers, yard signs, digital marketing on public facing websites, brokerage website displays, IDX or VOW, email blasts, multi-brokerage listing sharing networks, those in-house listings, that's supposed to go away, and applications available to the general public. Public marketing also includes marketing the public to real estate agents outside broker's office. Place appropriate transaction signs on the property. Use the seller's name in connection on advertising of the property. Sometimes the seller doesn't want their name in connection with the marketing of the app or advertising of the property. Display the property on the internet, except the street address. I typically see that like on investment properties or stuff like that, not too much. And then it says here, paragraph B, seller does not authorize broker to display the property on the MLS. If this is the case, make sure you are writing an MLS exemption form to your MLS or find out what they require. All the boards are different and the MLS is different as well. And this means that you will not be placing a for sale sign on the property. Okay, understands and acknowledges that if the seller checks option 6B or I, a for sale sign will not be placed on the property. Did you guys know that a for sale by owner sign, if you have a listing that the owner's not supposed to have their own sign up there? I've seen that as well. For sale by owner, and then right next to it, there's a brokerage sign.
Why is that?
That will get you in trouble. Well, that's the seller trying to sell it on his own.
Well, I got it, but why is it a problem?
Well, is what?
Why is it a problem?
Because
That's
he's
not
already being represented. He has a listing agreement signed with you, and that's why this one covers anybody that comes to the table. That exclusive brokerage agreement, he can say, well, I got the buyer from my sign, not from yours. But on this one, you are covered for any sale. Okay, are we clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so no signs. Seller understands and acknowledges that the seller checks option 6B or I, broker will be limited to marketing the property only to agents within the broker's office. You get it? So you can't do this to the public. You're only doing it to other agents. You're only marketing to other agents within our office. Paragraph C, obtain information relating to the present mortgage on the property. All right. Title's going to ask you for that anyway. And ask the seller as well. They need to know mortgage information. Provide objective comparative, and this will help you as well, because let's say they want to list it for less than what they owe. Well, you need to be careful because it could be a short sale. Okay, so just be careful. Try to get as much information up front. It's not, hey, I just got the listing, now what? It's, hey, let's try to get as much information. Do a walkthrough on the property. Have the seller point out the golden nuggets of the property. Why did they buy that property? What made them so interested in that property? What did they like so much? Have them point out the golden nuggets when you do that walkthrough with them. Have them point out any updates, any upgrades that they've done, or any repairs needed. And talk about that. Check if applicable. Use a lockbox. Obviously, if the owner allows you to use a lockbox, you would check this box off. If not, if he wants you to be present at all showings, then you will not check this box off. If you read the question, it also, the comment, a lockbox does not ensure the property's security. Seller is advised to secure all removable valuables. Seller agrees that the lockbox is for the seller's benefit and releases the broker, persons working through the broker, and broker's local realtor board association, all liability and responsibility in connection with any damage or loss that occurs. So if you're using a lockbox and the seller allows you to use a lockbox, back in the day, those numbered lockboxes, agents used to give them out and the people would go by themselves. Never, ever. Make sure that whoever you're giving showing instructions to, that they are accompanied by an agent or a broker. All right, don't ever allow people go on their own. Withhold verbal offers. I like to check that one off. Why would I, if something's been accepted already, why am I going to continue to give, or not even if it's accepted, put it in writing. You want to send me an offer, put it in writing. As a listing agent, I want to see offers in writing. Many a time, oh, we're sending you an offer this afternoon at 4 o'clock. This is what's going to happen. And 2 days later, you still don't have an offer. So I don't get into verbal offers. And I would usually check that box off. But then again, that's up to you. Withhold offers once the seller accepts a sales contract for the property. Do you want to continue feeding them with offers? Or do you want, typically what I like to do is I will check that off and I will have a conversation with the agent who sent me the offer and say, hey, I'm under contract. I'll give you more information once the inspection period is over. I'll give you more information once the financing period is over, whatever it is. And ask them, would the buyer mind waiting? And you can hold it as a backup offer. Okay. And then at that point, I would discuss it with the seller. Any questions on that so far?
Yes.
Virtual, yes, okay, go
Not
ahead.
understanding. I'm a little confused. What do you mean withhold verbal offers? You would check it to, give me a scenario.
Who's talking?
Sabina.
Hi, Sabina. So Sabina, you have a listing, right? And I'm a buyer's agent and Jeremy's my buyer. And Jeremy says, hey, call her up and give her an offer. So I call you up and I say, hey, we want to offer 200,000. We'll close in 30 days. Are we good? Do you accept the offer? And then typically I'll come back and say, well, put it in writing.
Right. So by checking this, you don't have to go back to your seller?
I wouldn't. By checking that, you don't have to go to your seller and present any verbal offers that were presented to you.
Okay.
If
And
you
then the
remember
other
when you
one?
took your, if you remember when you took your test, they tell you you have to present all offers, right?
Right.
Okay, this will protect you from verbal offers.
Okay. And then the other check mark, withhold.
Offers once the seller accepts the sales contract for the property. So if the seller says, hey, you know what, I don't want to deal with any other offers, I typically encourage them to entertain other offers because appraisal issues, inspection issues, you never know. Buyer issues, they want to back out. I want to be able to have a backup contract in place.
But you wouldn't check this then?
I would not. But then
Okay.
again, just remember, you can always go back. You can modify this and you don't have to modify it in writing.
Okay, but
This is just setting a
explain
precedence.
okay, so to explain it to your seller, when you're telling them, you would say, well, let's not check this just because if there's another backup offer coming in, I can, tell you about it. If I check it, then I can't tell you about it.
Basically what that means, it's not a golden rule.
No, I know. Okay, I just wanted to get it straight in my head.
Remember,
Okay,
everything's negotiable.
right.
All right, so paragraph F clearly states that you are acting as a transaction broker, which means you can bring a buyer to the table at any point. Okay, and you are to disclose any known facts to that buyer or buyer's agent. Virtual office websites. Some real estate brokerages offer real estate brokerage services online. These websites are referred to virtual office websites, VOWs. An automated estimate of market value or reviews or comments about a property may be displayed in conjunction with a property on some VOWs. Example of a VOW, some MLSs offer something that's called Rate Plug. That's an example of a VOW. It's a little link that you tap on the listing, and it's it's a mortgage calculator. And you type in the rate, and you type in the buyer's information, the conventional, how much down, all that stuff, and it'll give you a mortgage payment. IDX, that is when the MLS is sharing data with brokerage websites. So just to let you know, your HomeSmart page is IDX to all the MLSs that we're a member of. So your listings will pop up on HomeSmart. People can actually, the public can actually do home searches on HomeSmart, and it is IDX directly into the MLS. So any listings that you put up or any listings that are on any MLS, we have IDX rights, which means we can produce them or we can market them through our HomeSmart website as well. Seller does not authorize an estimated value market of the listing. This is more of a
Zillow.
okay, yeah, that's a good example, Zillow.
And
We all know about Zillow estimates, or what is it called? Zillow what? Zestimate. Yeah. They've actually gotten sued over that several times. I don't know if they won or not, but they've gotten sued over the Zillow estimates. Seller does not authorize third parties to write comments or reviews about the listing on the property. Display a hyperlink to such comments or reviews in immediate conjunction to the listing of the property.
Freddie,
Yes,
can I jump in real quick about the Zestimate thing?
yes.
I'll typically recommend to my clients that we check no. Because obviously this estimate might say a lot of people are looking for properties on Zillow, and everybody has their own little Zestimate or estimate of the property, but they don't know when the last time the roof was replaced or when the kitchen was renovated or anything like that. They don't know. It's just an algorithm of other similar type properties that have the same square footage, bedrooms, bathrooms, and it's educated algorithm guess, if you will. So I always say, hey, let's check no, that we don't want this to display, because if somebody's looking at Zillow and the price is $300,000 for the listing and Zillow is saying it's worth $260, they're gonna be like, oh, it's way overpriced. Based on what? On a estimate for an algorithm? So I always recommend no, take that off for what it's worth. Carry on.
Any questions, concerns on that? Any comments, feedback
Yeah,
on Jeremy's?
The only problem I have with that is it happens all the time because everybody goes to Zillow to see their house and then they say, oh, it's not on Zillow, so that potentially could create a problem for there.
Okay, so just to be clear, it still will display on Zillow and all the other sites, just the Zestimate, the automated estimate will not appear.
Oh, okay.
But thank you for that comment, because I'm sure somebody else thought that as well.
Typically, I tell my sellers to go on to Zillow and they can update the listing because everything's usually wrong. The number of bathrooms, or if they finished the basement. And I've had sellers actually sit in front of me and go online onto Zillow and increase the value by like $80,000 to $100,000 just by correcting everything. So I don't know, but good point.
That's a good way to do it.
John, that as a listing agent, you also have the authority to do that too in Zillow?
Yeah, I've seen that before too. Yep.
A lot of times just be careful, because I know back in the day, they used to make you claim the listing on Zillow. So you'd have to go in there and say, hey, I'm the listing agent on this.
Right.
Or the buyer's agent too as well. So if you get under contract for that property and it closes, you can go on to Zillow and say, hey, I closed this property as the buyer's agent. And then you can ask for reviews and stuff like that. So, and everybody, once you have that license, you have a Zillow account. So go in there and get your profile up, get it right. Get your picture in there. Start creating some algorithms. So a lot of agents say, oh, Zillow's my enemy. Well, you know what? I consider them my friend. Like John did. John, right? You're telling your sellers to go in there and do these updates so they can get the value up, right?
Correct.
All right, seller obligations and considerations of broker's obligations. Seller agrees to cooperate with broker in carrying out the purpose of this agreement, including referring immediately to the broker all inquiries regarding the property's transfer, whether by purchase, by other means, or transfer. So basically, you should be handling all the communications between any buyers, potential buyers, buyers agents, and the seller. Okay, I don't encourage you allowing the buyer or the buyer's agent talking directly to the seller, which is another thing. If you are if you're doing showings and you're allowing the buyer's agents to do the showings and you're not there, I always recommend that the seller take a walk if they live there, get out of the property. You don't want them being confronted with questions that you might not want them to answer. Okay.
Are there any other reasons?
Are there any other reasons why? I would say there's a bunch of reasons, but yeah, I would definitely have them take a walk. You don't want them showing the house either. You want to either show the house or have the buyer's agent show the home.
Have you ever
You don't want them hearing any comments that the buyer might say or things like that.
Have you ever been the buyer's agent and shown the property with the buyers and the sellers are there?
Absolutely, many a time.
What is the general feel
Um,
from the buyers?
the buyers really don't care too much as to who's showing the house, but sometimes the seller will say something that they're not supposed to, or they really shouldn't have, or the buyer might say something. So that's where that communication is key. And it should never, you shouldn't have as little communication as possible, if any, between buyer and seller.
Has anyone shown the property and the buyer just kind of felt awkward, like they couldn't look around much? Because
Absolutely. My
they're,
buyers hated it.
they kind of run in and out. They're like, oh, okay, thanks for bye.
It's
Yeah,
kind of like,
because
it's
they're
kind of
not
like
really
when they
open
walk
up.
into, go ahead, Christine.
They're always asking, like, can I go in that room? Can I open that? Can we, can I open that? What's that? Is that a closet? I'm like, freaking open it. Yeah, let's go. I don't care that they're here. Ignore them. If they want to stay, that's on them. But yeah, you open whatever closet you want to open.
Yeah, the buyers sometimes think that they can't speak freely in front of the sellers because it's awkward.
Right.
Correct, but you got to be careful now anyway with all the video cameras. Like I tell my buyers all the time, I'm like, outside, like, no.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, Christine. Yeah, hey, their whole conversation was recorded while they were seeing the house.
Exactly. I'm like, nope, outside in the driveway. We're not talking about any of that. So we're in the driveway.
Yeah, exactly. Any comments, stuff like that. Even if the house is empty, you never know if there's a camera in there watching you or
No.
listening. So, yeah, take conversations outside with your buyers.
Doug,
As long as it's not in front of that camera that's by your door, the ring.
Yeah,
They
the
Yeah.
can-
You got to get like out in the street, out in the driveway, like far out. I agree. Or I just say, you know what, I'll call you on the way to the next one.
hey Doug, is there anything that needs to be disclosed if you're listening or you have the ability to listen when you're like listing the property?
I don't know the answer to that, honestly. I haven't looked into that, but I believe there are some, at least some state laws that have to do with listening devices in general. So there might need to have been some type of sticker or something put up showing that those are there. But once you're in somebody's private home, the disclosure may not be there. The requirement may not be there. So I'm sorry, I don't have a direct answer on that.
No, that's right. So this is the philosophy I have when I'm listing a property, you guys, is when they have cameras and they have the ability to listen to someone on that camera. I said, if that's something you're gonna do and, kind of put that out there, then you need to put it like right on the camera. Like, I can hear you, be careful of what you say. So just from a full disclosure standpoint, and I try to tell my people, like, don't listen, like it's their private conversation. How would you feel if that was you in that situation? So, I mean, y'all can handle it however you want to, but I'm just trying to say how I do it.
You can also put it on the MLS listing itself and say, hey,
Even better.
house has cameras and security devices.
Yep.
In Virginia, I'm licensed up there. It's in the listing agreement and it's in the MLS. There's a check off for that too. So it's coming. It's not there already.
Yep.
Yeah, we have it in Connecticut as well. You have to disclose.
Okay, so continue, are we good with that? Everybody good? All right, so continuing on, recognized broker may be subject to additional MLS obligations and potential penalties for failure to comply with them. So let the seller know, hey, if I'm gonna market this, I need to put it on the MLS, unless obviously you've already discussed the previous paragraphs. Provide the broker with keys to the property and make the property available for the broker to show during reasonable times. Inform broker before leasing, mortgaging, or otherwise encumbering the property. Indemnify the broker and hold the broker harmless for losses, damages, costs, or expenses of any nature, including attorney fees, and from liability to any person the broker incurs because of seller's negligence, representations, misrepresentations, actions, or inactions. The use of a lockbox, the existence of an undisclosed material fact about the property, or a court or arbitration decision that a broker who has not compensated in connection with the transaction is entitled to compensation from the broker. From broker. This clause will survive broker's performance and the transfer of title. Doug, can you explain what that last sentence actually means?
Yeah, so basically that means that upon closing, the obligations associated are named in this paragraph continue on, and I think that refers mostly to protection against another broker. So if a buyer had signed an exclusive buyer type arrangement with the broker and then came to your listing without that broker, you sign them up as a transactional broker, and there was some dispute over that other broker being entitled to a part of the commission, and it was determined that they were, and you ended up having to pay it, you would be indemnified by this paragraph. And that survives the closing. So you wouldn't know about the damages until after the closing. So that's why it's in there. That makes sense?
To me, it does. Anyone, any questions on that?
No, sir.
All right, perform any act reasonably necessary to comply with FERPTA. We talked about FERPTA during the contract. Everybody knows what FERPTA is, right?
No, I wasn't present for that training. What is FERPTA?
Foreign investment. What was the acronym again? I know.
Real
Scott.
property transaction.
Tax assessment? No. Right?
Yeah, something like that. But basically it has to do with a foreign seller.
So remember, if the seller is foreign, in other words, they don't have residency here in the US or permanent residency, they are considered a foreign seller, and they have to fill out the form, the FERPTA disclosure.
What is the title company? Sorry.
Which means the title company is going to withhold a certain percentage for tax implications from the seller.
Right, so it's the Foreign Investment in Real Estate Property Tax Act. And once again, how this works is once we would receive the contract, we would send out a notification to the sellers and ask them if they were a foreign seller. And if the event they were, then there's a formula that we utilize to determine the amount of monies or the exemptions that they would be able to withhold. So it's all based on each transaction.
Okay, Scott, what information do you need from the buyer and or seller to accomplish it?
Well, we would work with the seller to find out basically how they wanted to, if they were a foreign seller, first and foremost, that would be the qualifier. The amount of the property would be a qualifier as well. And we're getting this information from the seller. Then if it is determined that the seller falls into this category, we would actually then start the process. They could file for the exemption ahead of time and pay ahead of time, or we would just go ahead and inform them of the amount of monies that we're going to be withholding, and we'll submit it to the government ourselves. As far as the buyer goes, the buyer is responsible for this. It's right in there. The buyer is responsible for the seller doing this. That's why we take the lead to make sure that the seller is on top of their game, so the buyer is not impacted it whatsoever.
What if the title company is saying, we're not going to withhold this amount?
Could you repeat that? I couldn't hear you.
What if the title company is saying that we're not gonna take care of this?
You're using the wrong title company.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what, Jeremy, me as a buyer, I'd walk away. I'd say, nope, I can't do this. I'm
I
not
have two
closing.
deals going on right now. Well, one just closed on Friday. But one is still going on, and it's like they have an accountant that's collecting this and sending off the money, and it's the same accountant, two different title companies. It's so weird. But I'm not representing the seller. We don't, choose the title company. And I'm like, why isn't the title company taking care of this? And to me, it seems like a scam. So I'm calling the title company to be like, hey, is this legit? Like, what's the person, what's their email, what's the contact? I'm like verifying all of this stuff, almost like wiring instructions, because they want my buyer's social security number.
Yeah, so there are some companies out there that specialize in the handling of FERPTA transactions, and they're usually accountants. But like you said, it adds an expense to the transaction.
Are
Remember,
we allowed to have split settlements in Florida? Like the seller can choose theirs, a buyer can choose theirs? Title companies?
Everything's
Yes.
negotiable. Everything's negotiable. You
Well,
cannot make anybody do anything.
but that's more common in an attorney state where attorneys are handling the closing. So in Florida, a title company has to write the title insurance. So usually you wouldn't have two. I suppose you could have one title company writing a mortgagee policy and the other writing the owner's policy. But that would add to the expense significantly.
yeah, because you're going to pay separate policies where there's a simultaneous policy issued on a mortgagee, where the sellers would pay for an owner's policy and then the mortgagee policy is required by the lender. So if you'd be paying the full amount on both policies if you had separate representation. That doesn't make any sense.
And our contracts actually call for, if the seller is choosing the title company or closing attorney, that the seller will pay for the buyer's title insurance policy. So, okay, you have the choice of choosing the seller's title company or attorney, but then again, the seller is going to compensate for the title insurance policy. So it's like a security blanket. Hey, okay, you can choose who you want, and we're going to give you this type of insurance and pay for it.
Is that negotiable or is that just boilerplate? You can't that's just like customary here.
Well, you only have those choices. So seller chooses, they pay. Buyer chooses, buyer pays. And then you have the Miami-Dade provisional in there for only Miami-Dade.
Freddie, I was just gonna say, on my contract that I use, like, you could choose who's gonna pay for, like, I don't have that I know on the FAR bar you're talking about, I understand where you're talking about that. But on my NEFAR PASA, you could check off boxes of who's gonna pay what.
Correct. Everything's negotiable in Florida. Nothing is, it's not like Doug said, it's not an attorney state where the attorney actually creates the contract and all that. So everything's negotiable on the contract.
Which is a lot more expensive, because I know my closing costs, and when I'm writing contracts in Connecticut, the closing costs are definitely more than here, because you've got two attorneys involved. It's a pain in the neck, actually. I'd prefer it like this. It is such a pain. I hate it.
Attorneys.
I'm sorry. It's the truth, because you're like, you've got two, they take forever to talk to each other. It's like, oh my God. Yeah.
So I think I took the class yesterday from RASM, the regular contracts class. And I think it was like Christine said, the contracts that they were using, there's multiple checkoff boxes there. So as long as they.
What's a regular purchase contract? John, I'm sorry. What's a regular purchase contract?
I think it was the standard contract. They went over, and I thought there was checkoff boxes for that, but I mean, if you had 15 people want to buy the house, it seems like the seller should be able to choose the title company, and I mean, if the buyer wants it, right?
John, it's negotiable in Florida. So anybody can choose, but you have to discuss that with your seller. There are some common practices according to the region. So for example, here in Central Florida, like Orlando, Tampa, anything central here, typically you're going to see the seller choose its title, but it doesn't have to be that way. Okay. If you write up an offer and you say, hey, the buyer wants to choose their own title company, then so be it. That's your offer. So nothing's written in stone. It's all negotiated.
So if the buyer wants to choose it, would the seller like that better since they don't have to pay for it?
It could be. But then the seller might say, well, you know what? I feel better with my title company. I don't care if I pay for the title insurance policy. I just feel better with my people.
Hey, Freddie, we're already a little past the hour. Do we want to wrap this up and continue next week?
Yeah, I just want to real quick, I want to touch on these next two paragraphs real quick. So very often, and this will take 5 minutes, very often do I see this filled out incorrectly. Please remember on this agreement, paragraph 8 is the total compensation paid by the seller. Okay, so if it's 6%, you need to write 6% in here. Even if you're only getting 3 and the buyer's agent's getting 3, you're going to split that up in the next one where it says cooperation. So up here is the total amount. If you're getting paid 5% and then you have to split that, then you split it down in the next paragraph. Don't split it up here, because then actually if you get this signed and you have a 2.5 per here saying, hey, I'm only getting paid 2.5, guess what? That's 2.5 for the total transaction that the seller owes you. Okay, so make sure that here is the total percent, 6%. Okay, on this one is for an option. What is that? A lease option.
Hey, Freddie,
Rent to own. Yeah.
I always charge 6% plus a transaction fee of $350. How would I do that here?
Well, it's right here, next line, right? Plus 350. 6% plus 350. I mean, it's right there. It's left for you. Or if you want to put a dollar amount instead of putting a percentage, you might be charging a flat fee. Okay, but just remember, out of that flat fee, you're going to have to offer compensation. All right. So here is your total. On the next one, B, this is for a lease option. I would do the same thing, 6%, because you're still selling the property under a lease option. Okay. Now the last one, C, is just to cover your butt, just in case you do get into a lease option with B. Obviously, you have to prepare a lease as well, right? So they're going to buy it. They're going to buy it with a lease option. So you have to prepare a lease and you have to prepare a purchase contract. I want to get paid for both. I'm going to get paid for the lease and I want to get paid for the sale. So I do 10%. That's not written in stone. 10% of the gross lease. So if the lease is $1,000 a month, 12 months, that's $12,000. I want 10% of that, $1,200. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, over here, line 122, termination date. This is a protection period for you. Let's say your offer expires, your listing expires in 3 months, but then there's a buyer that comes in the day after your listing expires, and this was your buyer, or a party of interest that came about while you were under a listing agreement. This is a protection period. So termination date, I typically put in either 60 or 90 days as a protection period, but that's me. Okay. So if anybody comes try to go behind my back with someone that I showed the property to, or that was shown by me, or that was under my listing agreement, and they come in 30 days afterwards and try to present an offer and cut you out, this is your protection period.
What if they relist with another broker?
What about it?
What happens to the protection period?
Well, that all depends. We're gonna go down to the next. Well, your protection period, actually, if you're gonna get a cancellation of a listing agreement, then your protection period is out the door, right? If you lost the listing.
Well, if it expires or something like that.
Correct.
So Mr. Freddie, we got 3 minutes till morning huddle.
All right, so then stop asking questions. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I don't know these things.
So retain real quick. So remember, up here is the full amount, and then down here is where you're going to split it up. In the first box, you check it off, and you put 3% going to the buyer's agent. And that's as a single agency. And you're going to offer everybody the same, okay? 3% for someone coming in as a transaction broker, just like you. And then the last one is for non-brokerage. Non-brokerage typically means that the buyer is being presented by an attorney. Attorneys are allowed to collect real estate commissions. Okay? 9 times out of 10, this is an attorney and they want to sell the house. They have a buyer, but they don't have a real estate license that's registered with a brokerage, right? They have an attorney license, but they can still sell real estate. So that's a non-brokerage relationship. And that's just one example. Okay. An attorney would be a non-brokerage relationship. Why would you not want to offer them compensation if they're bringing you a buyer? Very often do I see a 1 there on the MLS, a 2. They might offer less, but at the end of the day, I don't want a deal to fall apart just because of my compensation. That makes sense? If they have a solid buyer and I have no one else, I want to get that buyer. Okay. So make sure that this is where you split it up, cooperation and compensation. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about right here, and then we'll pick it up at another time, is retained deposits. As consideration for broker services, broker is entitled to receive. If you leave it blank, it's 50% of all deposits that the seller retains as liquidated damage for a buyer's default on a transaction, not to exceed the paragraph 8A fee. So basically, if the buyer defaults and there is an escrow dispute and the seller obtains that escrow, you're entitled to get paid. Because you brought that person to the table, you had procuring cause, it's not your fault that the buyer defaulted. So you're entitled to, let's say there's a $10,000 in escrow, you're entitled to 50% of that. Now, whether you want to take it or not, that's up to you. Okay, you might be going through some hard times with the seller. The seller's saying, well, you know what, I want to cancel the listing, whatever. Just, it's all negotiable. I just want to keep you aware that you are entitled to get paid because you did your job.
1 minute, Freddie.
Okay, last one, cancellation fee, conditional termination. And we'll go back to these next week. Actually, next week, we're not having a meeting. We're canceling because of Thanksgiving. I know a lot of people are traveling and stuff. So we're not going to have this meeting next Wednesday, but we'll pick it up the week after. Conditional termination, this is where you're going to put in your cancellation fee. The only time I would charge a cancellation fee is if I'm putting in professional photo shots and I'm paying out of pocket. Any marketing costs that are coming out of my pocket, I would want to get compensated for that. And your marketing, you know, but then again, this is negotiable. But if you're looking to get compensated for any expenditures that you had, this is where I would put it. So if you spent $1,000 on professional photo shots and marketing and all that stuff, and you say, well, you know, I have nothing to protect me and my money, let's say the seller wants to cancel this tomorrow and I've already spent this money, this is where you would protect yourself, okay? On a cancellation. Obviously, you can do it in the additional terms as well. All right. And that's all for today. Any questions or concerns? We will pick this up in 2 weeks.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good class.
And then don't forget, this Friday coming up, we are having our Friendsgiving at the Orlando branch office. At Jeremy, that time it starts at what?
Starts at 11 o'clock. You all should, I went individually and invited you all, so you all should have an invite in your, something, was that Christine Bouchard?
So if you guys are in the Orlando area, we are having our team meeting, first of all, at 10 o'clock, our virtual team meeting, which is every month. And Larry's going to spearhead our efforts this month. And then right after that, live and in person, we're having a little Smartsgiving, not a Friendsgiving, a Smartsgiving, we're calling it, at the Orlando office. So come on down, break bread with us. I'll be there, Jeremy will be there. And I think we have already about maybe 10 to 15 agents. Scott will be there that have RSVP'd. So come down, you know, come and say thanks, or let us say thanks.
You gotta bring
and
a
share some
tofu
time with
dish.
us.
It's gonna be amazing. Right, Larry?
Yeah, we got all the food covered, so don't bring anything. We got you covered. Just come on down and break some bread with us.
Come on now. Doug's gonna be there too. Gonna shake some hands with babies, for sure.
Yeah, I'll be traveling that day, unfortunately. I would sure like to be there.
No worries. You'll be missed by that.
All right. So this Friday, team meeting, and then live and in person Friendsgiving or Smartsgiving at the Orlando branch. See you guys.
Whatever you want, Freddie. All right. See y'all. Bye. Have a great day.
Have a good one.
Have a good